see you on there. Oh yeah, there you are.
I'm good there. Welcome everybody. Glad to have you come out tonight. This afternoon, I should say, not tonight. For this discussion today, we want to continue our discussion about Black History Month topics. And we're going a little bit off the beaten path this week. You know, instead of talking about historical personalities and such, we're going to talk about some historical concepts. We're going to delve into subject matter that's consistent with some of the greatest lessons that our people gave to the world in science, technology, and those types of things. So we're going to do a book review today. Let me break out the book. Actually, I brought the book. Me and the book been friends all day. And even as I say that, I recognize there's a possibility I might have left it on my desk. Not it. Here we go. Book review of Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt. I'm going to talk a bit about the guy who wrote the book, talk a little bit about what the book, the theories the book advances, talk a little bit about my background and my experience that gives me the capacity to take in this kind of material and share it with you. Let's see, I read this book on my recent trip to Ghana back in December. A good friend of mine, a brother named Ornette Gibson, back in Ohio, recommended this to me. Said that this book contained what he considered conclusive evidence that what was happening at the Great Pyramid of Giza was much more than a tomb, much more than we had been previously thought. It goes beyond the conversations about alignments with the stars and, you know, all of those things that we hear. There is actual convincing and compelling evidence that the Great Pyramid itself was once a power plant. This isn't based on his reading of ancient texts or anything like that. Nobody, you know, no spirit revealed this to him or anything like that. He had access to the pyramid, made his way through the pyramid along, you know, coming from, his name is Christopher Dunn, he's the author. He brought almost 40 years of experience in engineering and manufacturing, precision manufacturing with him when he had access to it. And based on that experience and expertise, he was able to see things there that other people didn't see. Once he put some of his inspection equipment to work on it, it revealed some things that are quite compelling, to say the least. I'll throw in a disclaimer as I go through this about where we're going to go with it. But as I said before, I'm going to interject some of our own spiritual teachings in all of these lessons. Here's a quote from the Odu Ifa, Ethical Teachings of the Yoruba People. And this particular verse speaks to what undergirds the conversation today, what lies at the foundation of it. We're going to have a conversation about a power plant being produced by ancient people and the technology behind it not being like what we use today that depletes the earth and pollutes the earth and all of those things, but uses the natural energies of the earth in a constructive way that's, you know, potentially damaging to the people, but not damaging to the earth. So I found this verse here that has a relevant message to that. And it's chapter 10:5 out of the Odu Ifa, and it reads, Osa, the brightly shining one, Babalawo of the world. Babalawo is like a priest, teacher priest. Interpreted the teachings of Ifa for the earth. They said that the earth should stop making sacrifices for wealth and instead make sacrifices that will protect earth from its enemies. In this way, we will live. And so we plead that as long as we live on earth, that the earth not be destroyed. Of course, Ashe. Of course, we know that when you talk about traditional African people, traditional African culture, there's a profound respect for nature. Everything begins with that, right? So that's reflected in the conversation that we're going to have today and in the material that's being presented, where once again a power plant was conceived and constructed that respected the earth, didn't deplete the earth, drew from the earth's natural energies. Giza Power Plant, again, is the title of the book, Technologies of Ancient Egypt. written by a man named Christopher Dunn. I'll tell you more about in a second. When Christopher Dunn visited the Great Pyramid Complex at Giza, he brought along almost 40 years' experience in engineering and precision manufacturing that allowed him to see things other people couldn't see. His expertise and inspection equipment revealed highly precise machine manufacturing, along with clear evidence that the Great Pyramid once functioned as a power plant. Join us as I apply over 30 years of my own engineering experience to explain this as best as I can at this point. This is off the back cover of the book. Did a highly advanced civilization exist in prehistory? Is the Giza Pyramid a remnant of their technology? Then what was the power source that fueled such a civilization? Of course, an advanced civilization needs power. You know, it's not going to run just on air. You know, good thoughts, you know, spiritual things. You know, you got to have some power to drive the system practically. The technology of harmonic resonance claims renowned master craftsman and engineer Christopher Dunn. He claims that it's harmonic resonance that provided the power. I'll get to that in a moment. In a brilliant piece of reverse engineering based on 20 years of research, Dunn reveals that the Great Pyramid of Giza was actually a large acoustical device. By its size and dimensions, this crystal edifice created a harmonic resonance with the Earth and converted Earth's vibrational energies to microwave radiation. The author shows how the pyramid's numerous chambers and passageways were positioned with the deliberate precision to maximize its acoustical qualities. This may be the same technology discovered by Nikola Tesla and the solution to our own clean energy needs. Who's familiar with Nikola Tesla? All right. If you're not familiar with him, you benefit from some of the advances that he brought forth. The power system that's providing the energy, that's powering the lights, and that powers the modern world, AC, alternating current, is based on the ideas of Nikola Tesla. Nikola Tesla, I didn't know this when I first became familiar with Nikola Tesla, but he was also deep into the studies of ancient chemistry. And it's suggested that much of his genius was informed by some of the abstract readings that he did out of ancient chemistry, because certainly some of the things that he put forth are represented in the records and the carvings on the temple walls in ancient chemistry. So he does this term is significant, reverse engineering. I do that constantly in my work. This is from his website. This is Christopher Dunn. Christopher Dunn has an extensive background as a craftsman, starting his career as an indentured apprentice in his hometown of Manchester, England. He's an Englishman. Recruited by an aerospace manufacturing company, he immigrated to the United States in 1969. Over the past 49 years, Chris has worked at every level of high-tech manufacturing, from machinist, toolmaker, programmer, and operator of high-power industrial lasers, project manager, and laser operations manager. For the past 16 years, he's been a human resources director for a Midwest aerospace manufacturer. Chris's Pyramid Odyssey began in 1977 after he read Peter Tompkins' book, Secrets of the Great Pyramid. His immediate reaction after learning of the Great Pyramid's precision and design characteristics was to consider that this edifice may have had an original purpose that differed from conventional opinion. After further research and study of source material on various theories, Chris concluded that it must have originally been built to provide a highly technical society with energy. In short, it was a very large machine. Discovering the purpose of this machine and documenting his case has taken the better part of 20 years of research, and following the 1998 publication of Chris's book, Giza Power Plant, Technologies of Ancient Egypt, which describes a holistic energy device that is harmonically coupled with the earth and its inhabitants. Chris has published over a dozen magazine articles, including the much-quoted Advanced Machining in Ancient Egypt, which was published in an analog magazine called Analog in August 1984, and has had his research referenced in over a dozen books on Egypt. In the United States, he has appeared on PAX Television, the Travel Channel, Discovery Channel, Learning Channel, Lifetime, blah, 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 and most recently on the History Channel in the Ancient Alien episode, The Evidence. And I have a short clip from that, so we'll get the opportunity to hear from him in his own words. His second book, entitled Lost Technologies of Ancient Egypt, Advanced Engineering in the Temples of the Pharaohs was published by Intertraditions Bearing Company in June of 2010. In this work, Chris focuses on an important aspect of his research into the manufacturing capabilities of the ancient Egyptians, and through his engineer's eye and camera, reveals to his readers previously overlooked magisterial characteristics of Egyptian architecture and manufacturing wizardry. It's all right there. That's what I like about this book. I'm going to speak to my limitations where it's concerned. What I like is that it's based on evidence on the ground. You know, what we can go and see today, and if we have the required expertise, can offer an opinion on what he's put forth here, right? Now this is me. I think I'm down to 3 pages. I was up to 5 pages with my resume. I got almost 35 years experience in electrical, mechanical, and electromechanical product and system design for a broad mix of application. My experience includes manufacturing coordination, first article testing, installation support, and all things related to product and system design. I currently provide consulting services for design and prototype manufacturing. My shop at home includes a 3D printer, a lathe, a milling machine, and a broad range of tools and test equipment. I say I can make anything, and I can because I have. You'll get a little taste of that. I'm going to run through a few examples of some of the stuff that I've worked on over the years. This right here is a belt-mounted printer. That's an exploded view of it. It's like when you go to return a rental car at the airport and you just want to drop the car off and go, and there's an attendant out there, and they meet you and they enter a couple of things, and then they pull the receipt off their hip. Well, that's an example of the type of printer. I didn't design the electronics. I designed the enclosure around it and made it fit, designed it so that it could be manufactured hundreds of thousands, millions of times actually, out of plastic and all of that stuff. This right here was one of the more interesting things I got involved in. I did these two at the same company. These two were at the same company, a design house down in Fountain Valley. This was a redesign, an upgrade for an examination station. So for an eye exam. So when you go in, and it's for particular maladies. This was very interesting because I designed this, I think, in 2006, something like that. And then maybe in 2013, I had to go and get an eye exam. And I walked into the office at Kaiser, and I saw this, and I'm looking at it, and I thought it looked familiar. And then I asked the tech, I was like, hey, can I go and take a look at that? And she said, they looking at me like, wow. I was like, I think I designed that. Can I take a close look? So sure enough, I went around and took a look. I saw the manufacturer name, Heidelberg, and all of that, and I was like, yeah, I designed this.
Wow.
I designed this. So all it does is just the table. It holds the computer, the monitor, and the test equipment and all of that. But it was a real thrill to see it in operation. I've seen some of my stuff on Discovery Channel. One of the things I'll show in one of the upcoming screens. This right here is a kiosk that I designed for a company in Cerritos many years ago. This right here is a head restraint that I designed for a company out in San Bernardino. Optimus Technology, they designed and built the Proton Cancer Treatment Center at Loma Linda University Medical Center. I was involved in redesigning one of the treatment rooms there many years ago, and my specific responsibility involved designing a head restraint system for people going in there to get treatment for tumors in the head, something like that. And so this was my, so for repeatable positioning and all of that. I was also involved in the bed design, but I wasn't exclusively involved in that. The head restraint was all mine. And I should be clear, this was all mine, that was all mine, that was all mine. I was a part of the team. This right here is just a quick screen capture I pulled up of the wastewater treatment system that I helped design. I was lead mechanical on that, but I wasn't the lead technology guy on that. We had another guy who I reported to. And this was for a company in Virginia. It treated wastewater right at the end of the treatment cycle, right before the treated water would get dumped back into earth water systems. And it had a reactor in there that had UV light in it that was supposed to be the last stop to blast all.
Is that really big?
No, it was about 8 feet tall, about 4 feet wide, maybe about 2 to 3 feet deep. Wasn't huge. It could be scaled though. They depending on the capacity of the treatment center, they would have multiples, to handle all of the capacity. So these are just some examples. My greatest claim to fame, the thing that I'm most proud of though, are some shuttle flight experiments that I worked on for NASA, and this was the first one. This was called SAMPI, Solar Array Module Plasma Interaction Experiment. This flew aboard mission STS-62 in 1993. I started working on it in 91. It flew in 93.
Wow.
But this was, like I say, I'm most proud of this, this particular experiment. The technology behind it the data collected was used to design the power system for the space station that's up there right now, and other systems, satellites and stuff that go up there.
We'll wait for your movie, Hidden Figures 2.
Okay.
Well, again, I wasn't lead on this project. I was a supporting designer on this project. So, and interestingly enough, I just found a video for this experiment on the web this morning. Maybe I'll do a presentation on my work and include that. But the experiment was real interesting because the technology behind it required it to be mounted in the highest area possible in the exposed cargo bay. So when it actually mounted, when this shows it, this is the box right here, and then the two little probes. These are two probes that what it did, it measured the way solar cells and differently treated metals interacted with the space environment. There's free floating energy up there, sort of like charged ions, like electricity in the air, so to speak. So we tested different solar cell technologies to determine how they would collect that energy and how it could be harnessed, and used for practical purposes. So we had these two probes, and then this box, and then a whole lot of electronics under there. One of our other engineers designed the experiment plate. I designed this enclosure. I designed the probes. I designed the support rack underneath there and several other components underneath there. So it was quite interesting when when this launched. The whole team gathered in the break room at NASA, and we were watching NASA TV, watching the launch, all excited like kids on Christmas. And we had a successful launch, but then there was a break, a period of several hours for the shuttle to get into its proper orientation before they would open up the cargo bay doors. But I was just as excited about that moment because the way the experiment was mounted, we were going to be able to see it, So this isn't very clear, but when we were looking at it on NASA TV, you could clearly see our experiment right here, and the probes right in front of it. And this only gives a glimpse of the moment that changed my life and has a lot to do with why I'm standing here right now. Because while I was standing there, and they flipped open those cargo bay doors, I'm standing there, all excited, taking in, the fact that I can see my work there, and it's like my baby up there, and it's sort of like how, we put a dime or a coin next to something to give it scale. So this was sort of like the same thing for me because I had been involved in this for over 2 years. I knew it in and out. And I'm standing there looking at it against the backdrop of space. And then guess what? The Earth passed by in the background.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was like, that I was frozen. That froze me. Like, wow. And I literally felt the need to go and sit in a dark closet and try to process what I had just witnessed so that I could really, so that the significance of it wouldn't be lost, because it felt like that was a big deal to see that like that, right?
Yeah.
So then over the course of the next hours, days, weeks, and months, I realized that I just became increasingly frustrated with the human condition and the fact that we are all alone out here on this little rock, far removed or completely unaware of anything else that we can relate to, yet and still we're fighting amongst ourselves over things that a trusting Creator has lent to us all for a short time.
Yes.
I was changed by that experience. So that brings me here. Here's another example of a product that I worked on. I designed. This is a powder paint gun, and this has been superseded by a new version now. But I actually saw this on Discovery Channel. program called How They Do It,
Uh-huh.
or How It's Done, or,
Right,
or
right.
something like that.
Uh-huh.
They were showing how to paint enclosures for office equipment like file cabinets and like enclosures for refrigerators and stuff like that. And they use powder paint for that. And to my surprise, while they're going through the program, there I see this dude swinging my gun, you know, back in the house. Oh man, wow! And I'd actually seen that out in the field too. I was actually doing field work, looking for a manufacturer to manufacture this system that I was working on. This company was in Virginia, and we were in North Carolina looking for a company that could help manufacture it. So I went into this obscure sheet metal shop, and I think it was Zebulon, North Carolina. You don't get more backwoods than that, right? And there that guy was back there, stroking with my gun, painting metal things. So they were doing that on there, so it was real exciting to see that. So powder paint gun, this kicks out 100,000 volts out the end of it. It creates like a field, and then the plastic, the paint is nothing but plastic, pulverized, powder. It passes through the electric field and picks up the charge, and then it's sprayed onto. It can only be metal, metal equipment, because it's hanging on a conveyor and it's electrically grounded. So what happens is the physics causes the charged paint particles to attach to it in a very even layer, and then the conveyor takes them into a furnace, and the furnace cooks the paint, and it cooks on with a nice solid finish. So this is just another example of a project I worked on. It's hard to start talking about my work without going into it. So because I've been around and I've done a lot of stuff. And I thought it's important to show some of that for you all to understand why I was able to have a perspective on this book that I did. This is one of the examples of some work that I did for Disney. I worked for Imagineering, consulted for them for many years. And this is an example of, I worked in the special effects department out there. This is a special effect that I designed for I think this was Peter Pan. This was going into the Shanghai part. And this is just a rough image that shows what it looks like. What this effect did, it was on a pirate ship, and the pirate ship rocked back and forth, and it had as the ride made it to a certain point in the attraction, it would set off a timer or a sensor that would cause a cannon fire. So underneath here, there's this structure right here, all underneath here. This is the floor. This is what you see, when you're riding above. But underneath, we got this frame structure, and I got this chamber underneath here, and the chamber has a mister in it, like if you were creating mist in your pool, your garden, or something like that. It's just that type of a mister that I got down in there. And I got high pressure air coming in, and a couple of solenoids that are timed and all of that with the LED in there to create a light. They have it set up with sound so that you have the blast sound and all of that. And then we create steam inside of this vessel, and then there's a puff of air that would be timed, and it would cause that steam to puff out the barrel and make it look like, with the light flashing at the same time, it would look like a cannon blast that happened. So I did dozens of effects, like that for them. Always, system level stuff, This, I also did animations for a while. I stopped doing animations because, to my surprise, industry didn't pick up on the value, the benefit of that. Me doing design, I thought I'm the right person to do your simulations, but this seems they still want to relegate this function to marketing people. So it still boggles my mind that this didn't catch on more, but nonetheless, I stopped doing animations and I now do prototypes. So I do, after I design a product or a system, then I'll go home if they want me to, and I'll manufacture the first article. you know, the plastic and the metal components that go into it and put it together and all of those things. So this is a brief animation that I did for, I did this project for Diebold in Canton, Ohio. Diebold makes money machines and all of that. You'll see their name on ATMs and all of that. They also make those bogus voting machines, and all of that, you know. But I was employed there, contracted there to help design this system, and I was able to sell my services doing animated graphics because they were struggling to get the first system ready to take to the big banking trade show. And we were having troubleshooting issues, so they were about to scrap the idea of debuting this at the big trade show. And then I caught the project manager after work one day, and I said, hey, I flipped him my demo disc. I said, hey, you want to take a look at this? You know, I might have a solution, you know, for you to be able to debut this at the big trade show anyway. So I gave him a demo of a simulation that I had done for another project. And he went home and, you know, saw it, came back the next day, and he asked, so what are you saying? Because it was just an animated simulation of a Profi cup. Profi cup is that thing that's attached to the top of the little drill when you go and get your teeth cleaned. So it showed how that assembles from like a series, I think it was 4 or 5 different pieces, and then it actually spun it up with a drill sound to show how it operates. So, I did that. I did the animated graphics. I cut the soundtrack. I did some of the programming to make it load and install like a Windows program and all of that stuff. So he wanted to know the next day, well, what are you offering us and how much of this did you do? I said, well, I did all of that. You know, from the graphics to the sound. I didn't produce the sound. You know, I didn't play the music, the instruments, but I put together the soundtrack. I captured the sound effect and everything, and I did the program. I said what I could offer you, I could take these 3D models that we've used in the design, and I could produce an animated simulation machine so that you could still debut this machine at the big trade show. You don't have to wait until the next year's show, you know, to debut it. So long story short, that conversation went all the way up to the chain, and I was sitting in the office of one of the executive vice presidents to get approval for the project. I got approval for the project, and then I produced what was a 3-minute video for them, and this is just a portion of it. That went. This is the. This is what they call the express delivery system. This was a teller assist device. It's for taking cash deposits and cash withdrawals. You go to the teller and tell the teller, well, you hand her a stack of cash. The teller sticks the cash in the machine like that. The machine does a verification loop to determine whether it's counterfeit, determine what the currency value is, and then it assigns a storage bin. So at the end of the day, the drawers are already tallied. All they have to do is remove them and, you know, go on about their business, right? So it's a teller assist device. This is only a portion of the simulation. I didn't want to put the whole 3 minutes in. That just shows the accept function. There's also the dispense function, the service aspects, and the collection at the end of the day. And I simulated all of that. So they were able to debut their system at the trade show. They were able to sell systems on the strength of the simulation only, but they wanted to argue with me about the cost of this simulation, trying to tell me that this was a technical demonstration tool, not a marketing tool. You know, they're telling me that if you keep this under 10,000, we got other systems. I was like, well, you got other systems, whether I keep it under 10,000 or not. And I'm only interested in doing this kind of work for you if you're going to pay me what it's worth, you know. Right. Yes. I'm not, you know, I mean, because even what I charged them was a significant discount compared to if they had gone to, you know, a design house to get it done. But in any case, that was that experience. This was my second shuttle flight experiment. I did this as a consultant. My first experiment, I was an employee. I broke away and started my own company, and I came back to them as a consultant. I designed this experiment in my pajamas in my spare bedroom. This was done in conjunction with, it was at the NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio.
It was done with the Department of Physics at Carnegie Mellon University and my company, CAD Services Incorporated. It was called the Microscale Hydrodynamic Study. It applied PhD level fluid physics in measuring the instantaneous angle at the point where a fluid wets the surface. In other words, if you throw a fluid on a surface, all that activity happened within a 1.5 millimeter field of view, right at the point where the fluid wets the surface. It was measuring the instantaneous angle, and somehow that data would be interpreted to improve lubrication applications on Earth. So this was the system that we designed to accomplish that up in space. The zero gravity environment provides a pure environment for testing certain physical phenomena, and the way a fluid lubricates the surface was one of those. So this is a 20-second or so simulation that simulates what takes place over about 9 hours up there, and I'll talk through it real quick. What we show first is the settling period after launch, where the fluid has to settle. Once the fluid settles, the astronauts would engage the motor on the system. The system, telescoping cylinders, gold-plated telescoping cylinders, would break the surface of the oil. That's a highly viscous silicon oil right there. And once it broke the surface, the motor would be stopped, and the surface tension would cause the fluid to start climbing up the cylinder as it began to do. And then when it reached a certain predetermined point, the motor would be re-engaged, and then the cylinders would start pressing back into the vat of oil. And as the cylinders entered into the vat of oil, the oil was filled up into the lip. So when the cylinders enter into the vat of oil, it would displace a proportionate amount of oil. You know, on Earth, in the presence of gravity, you would just have a spillover.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but in the zero gravity environment, with this edge being highly precise and highly engineered, it wouldn't spill over. It would be what's called pin on that edge, and you would get this bubbling effect, you know, where the fluid will begin to bubble up as opposed to spill over, you know. And that was all part of the experiment. I may have gone into too much detail, but in any case, the number 2 man in the Department of Physics at Carnegie Mellon was the principal scientist on this experiment. And I remember I had a hell of a time convincing the project managers to invest in this simulation. But I was finally able to get them to do it, because they don't have a profit motive at NASA. So, you know, if you can't justify it, then you can't get funding for it. But I was able to get them to do it. And when the very first time I showed this simulation, Steve Geroff, who was the number 2 man in the Department of Physics at Carnegie Mellon, jumped out of his seat. He jumped out of his seat, and he pointed at the screen, and he said, "That's it. That's it." You know, because this is a simulation of what will happen in space. So I'll say this. I had my vision for producing simulations like this when I was at the design review for my first shuttle flight experiment, the other NASA one. Because, you know, PhDs, I mean, there are egos involved with them. And the first design review, after I worked on that experiment for 2 years, I didn't know what the hell they were talking about in the design review, because they started using this language, you know, so that only PhDs could understand what was being said. And I was sitting there, I was like, now I got 3D models of this whole experiment, not this one, but the other one. I said, if I could just simulate them, put them in motion, all I would have to do is point at the screen and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish.
Right.
So this was the fulfillment of that, you know, with Steve Geroff jumping out of his seat, pointing at it, saying, you know, that's it. That was exactly what I was talking about and had conceived previously. If I can simulate it, all you got to do is point at the screen and say, that's what we're trying to do. So that's a little bit of my background. And this is the simulation again. I might as well show it again. Fluid settled, it broke the surface, stopped moving. Started climbing, reached a certain point. We re-engaged the motor. You can see the cylinders going down there into it, and it's telescoping. Now the larger one went down, and then the third one went down after that.
Yeah.
So all of those, the camera was following all of those. And, you know, PhD fluid physics going on right there. I'm currently working for a company called Calinetics Technologies down in Cerritos, and I am designing Magna-Force electric motor generators. I'm designing Vericycle power electronics, and I'm using power flux active magnetic bearings in the process of this. Just yesterday, I just wrapped up a project for GE, high-powered motor generator. I can't get into too many of the details, of course. With an accompanying power electronic system. I'm not the lead on this, I should be clear. There are PhDs who are, doing the conceptual work, and they hand that down to me and other engineers to make it practical, right? So there are certain things about this that I don't understand. I'm not trying to present myself as an authority on this entire system, but when they look at the system, they're going to be looking at my work, all of that. I took the concepts that have been developed and reduced it to detailed drawings that were then reduced to manufactured parts that then became an assembled system that was just tested, packaged, and shipped. And I just charged my last hours to it yesterday. So I'm working down there for them as a consultant. So I say all of this to say that I bring a background, that allows me to look at the type of material presented in this book and have some immediate perception of its viability. That doesn't mean that I understand it, at the fullest level. It would be irresponsible for me to suggest that I could. Every new system has to be studied on its own merits. But a friend of mine who has a different perspective on this dismissed this book outright as silliness. And I had to, point out to him, brother, I'm not prone to silliness on these types of matters. I got over 30 years of doing this work. So if it was silly, I would have perceived it as such immediately and would have dismissed it with no further conversation. It can't be suggested that what he's suggesting here is silliness, especially if you haven't read the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the first thing.
If you're not speaking from some qualified position, you're taking against what's being said here. You're just saying because Dr. Ben or one of the other scholars didn't say it. That don't make it.
That's right.
That's
right.
The limits of knowledge in any field have never been set, and no one has ever reached them.
There you go.
Wisdom is rarer than emeralds, yet it can be found among the women who gather at the grindstone.
There you go.
Right?
I like that.
So, Dr. Ben didn't know everything.
There you go.
So again, we have the Giza Power Plant, and we're all familiar with this image of the Great Pyramid. It describes the elements: southern shafts, King's Chamber, northern shafts, Queen's Chamber, the passageways, the passageways over here, the ascending passage, the shaft, well shaft, the horizontal passage, the subterranean chamber, all of those things. This only makes sense if you understand all of those elements as being part of a system. If you can explain what this does in relationship to this, in relationship to that, and everything else, that's the only way it makes sense. Yeah, it can be said that these shafts were at one point aligned with celestial objects, and it was a temple. It was done to celebrate that some kind of way. But that doesn't explain this horizontal passage. That doesn't explain what was found in the Grand Gallery. There are things there that deserve to be explained if you're going to really understand what this whole, structure is all about, right? In his work, Christopher Dunn relabeled these elements based on what he observed there. What's known as the King's Chamber is actually a resonant quartzite chamber. And he determined that because of what's in there. What's in there? Quartz that's in there. He describes right here, before you get into that, we got an acoustic filter. Down here, this is a resonator hall with elements in there that actually had a role in converting vibrational energy into sound energy. He was able to see that based on what's there and explain that. This is a reaction chamber down here. He found evidence that in this passageway, there had been dilute hydrochloric acid poured into that chamber. Over here, hydrated zinc chloride. A hydrated zinc chloride solution was poured into that side. There's evidence of those substances still there today. Right? So I have a well-developed appreciation for this book and the alternate perspectives it advances.
Before we move on, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
I might have missed it because I was out there. The actual stone of the actual pyramids, did he explain the role of the actual rock that was made, the pyramids, in relationship to those different chambers and things?
Yes.
I was gone, huh?
No. We're coming to that.
We didn't get there yet.
We didn't get there yet. Here's my disclaimer. This is an introductory, not exactly introductory, maybe an intermediate review of the book and its related theories. Okay? I have a basic understanding of the concepts presented and the broader ideas being suggested, but I have not visited the Giza Pyramid complex to confirm or deny Dunn's assertions about existing evidence found there. Also, although I did read the entire book while in Ghana last December, I have not studied the book and its theories from a critical systems analysis level to be able to absolutely confirm what is being suggested. However, based on my initial read and the perspective gained through over 30 years' experience, I find its assertions to be plausible and worthy of further examination and experimentation to be confirmed or dismissed. I went back to work, talked to some of the PhDs about this. You know, it's like, you know, this is what I read and this is what's going on in there. What is your thought on, you know, whether that can be done? I gave them some supporting material, you know, 3 of them I talked to. One of them hasn't gotten back to me yet. But he's one of the owners of the company. The principal, one of the principal engineers, a Russian dude, he thought it was plausible. One of the lead engineers who spent more time than anybody else looking at the material I presented came over and had a 2-hour conversation with me about it all because he was so intrigued by it, right? So these aren't run-of-the-mill, okey-doke type people who gonna get caught off wandering on some nonsense. You know, that's not gonna happen, right? The book itself has 15 chapters. Chapters 1 and 2 reviews what is known and believed about the pyramids, considered against the evidence surviving today. This raises many challenges to commonly held beliefs that the ancient Kemet II were technologically limited or that the pyramids were originally constructed as tombs. That is nonsense. According to what Christopher Dunn puts forth, there's never been an original burial found in the Great Pyramids. There's no original burial. There may have been some subsequent burials after the fact, but no original has been found. Valid questions are posed about disputed theories on the pyramid's original purpose, the cultural bias often involved in those disputes, because, you know, it's said that they don't know how they were built and all that.
Yeah,
They know a lot more than they will tell, because telling it would mean that they would have to give credit to these ancient people, ancient African people, for doing highly technological things, high technology. They don't want to do that. So it's much easier to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a cultural bias often involved in these disputes and a range of related contradictions between established perceptions of ancient Egyptian knowledge and capabilities and the evidence found on site today. Ultimately, these first 2 chapters challenge any theory of the pyramid's original intent to include a complex explanation of every structural element remaining. Read that again. It challenges, it said, as I said earlier, that to understand this pyramid, you got to be able to explain what every element does in relationship to the other. You know?
That's heavy.
Yeah, that's what the ultimate challenge is. You know, if you're going to explain it, you need to be able to explain the whole thing, not leave out bits and pieces,
Sure.
you know, in order to get there. Chapter 3 shatters traditionally held beliefs that the ancient Kemet II were limited to brass and copper tools. That's what they said. That they didn't even have the wheel. And all they had were hand tools, brass and copper. Nonsense. There's no way that pyramid could have been constructed with manual tools, copper and brass. Absolutely no way. Granite wouldn't allow it. Dunn shows that Chapter 3 shatters traditionally held beliefs that the ancient Kemetu were limited to brass and copper tools and coarse manual labor manufacturing. You can't get some of this stuff done with human strength alone. It can't happen. Dunn shows that the extremely large and heavy granite, quartz, and other hardened stone and metal materials required far more capacity than manual labor alone for the large-scale manufacturing and transport effort required. By inspecting the Great Pyramid as it exists today with modern inspection equipment, Dunn shows incredibly high precision manufacturing techniques were used in their construction, requiring far more than coarse tools and manual labor. They needed some power to make that happen.
I want to say something. You know, I'm not a comic book person, but I did go see the Black Panther. And, but I guess everybody that's into Marvel, they know all the theories on whatever that civilization is called. Yeah. But anyway, I was going to say, you know, because one of the things they said, they were going to hide their advanced civilization right there so you couldn't see it, but it's right here in front of you, and it was all advanced.
Yeah.
You know, so they had the like you're saying, the primitive kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you think, oh, this is just a primitive civilization, but then when you take a closer look, here's this advanced civilization right here that you can't see.
I'm sorry, or you don't want to see.
Don't want to see.
Don't want to see. It's more a question of will at this point. This is from chapter 3. I'm gonna read a little bit of this, and this gets to your point there, Khalif. Caption here: to manufacture I'll read that after I read it. Close examination of the casing stones. Casing stones are the outer stones on the pyramid, revealed variations so minute that they were barely discernible to the naked eye. The records show that the outer casing blocks were square and flat, with a mean variation of 1/100th of an inch over an area of 35 square feet. That's absolute amazing precision. Rivals what we can produce in our best manufacturing facilities today. Well, not our best. We can take it much lower than 10,000. Than 10,000 something. So 1/100th or 10,000th of an inch. Fitted together, the blocks maintain a gap of 0 to 1/50th or 20,000th of an inch, which might be compared with the thickness of a fingernail. Inside this gap was cement that bonded the limestone so firmly that the strength of the joint was greater than the limestone itself. The composition of the cement has been a mystery for years. The casing blocks were reported to weigh between 16 and 20 tons each, with the largest blocks measuring 5 feet high, 12 feet long, and 8 feet deep. It was these figures that greatly influenced my preliminary assessment of the pyramid. That's Christopher Dunn talking. Here was a prehistoric monument that was constructed with such precision that you could not find a comparable modern building. We don't get into 10,000ths of an inch tolerances across 35 square feet in modern day construction. We could do it, but that level of precision is not required for a building. For what purpose? You know, there's a tremendous expense involved with achieving that level of precision. And if it's not necessary, if it doesn't serve a purpose, then we're not going to invest in it. Obviously, there was something going on there that called for that level of precision and for the time and resource investment that it would take to accomplish. Here was a prehistoric monument that was constructed with such precision that you could not find a comparable modern building. More remarkable was that the builders evidently found it necessary to maintain a standard of precision that can be found today in machine shops, but certainly not on building sites. These details are important, and we should consider them as we seek to determine how the ancient Egyptians quarried dressed, and assembled those blocks. Although the exact precision demonstrated in the manufacture and assembly of the Great Pyramid may have had little significance a century ago, there are at this time many people who are intimately familiar with these dimensional tolerances. I am one of them, Christopher Dunn and me. For many years, creating products with tolerances much finer than 10,000th of an inch. On that shuttle flight experiment, that first one, Sampy, I had across, and I didn't show the inside of that enclosure, but I had what's called a card cage in there that mounted all of the electronic boards. I had 2,000ths of an inch tolerance across the entire system that I had to divide between all of the components. So we were machining features into assembly features in those to within 5,000ths of an inch precision. They had to be placed accurately to within 5.000, 3 zeros and a 5 of an inch. Talk about precision. So I know what it takes to hold such fine tolerances, and there's a great difference between knowing what 10,000ths or 1/100th of an inch is from an abstract academic viewpoint and understanding what 10,000ths of an inch is from hands-on practical experience. That is why I laugh, he said, when I hear intelligent men and women proposing that the pyramids and other artifacts were created using hammers and chisels. Other machinists, toolmakers, and engineers with whom I have discussed this issue are equally amused and normally just shake their heads and mutter something straightforward and unprintable. He goes on. Through my own experience in manufacturing, I've realized that theories and ideas that seem to work fine in my mind or on paper could be rendered unworkable when I actually tried to apply them. In much the same way, I found that many theories regarding the building of the Great Pyramid are not supported with material proof, for no one, despite numerous attempts, has been able to duplicate the structure using the methods theorized to have been in place in ancient Egypt. These methods have been applied with limited success in building smaller structures, but they are not attempts to replicate the more difficult aspects of the building. A pyramid that is 20 or 50 feet tall and built with limestone blocks that weigh no more than 2 tons does not explain how the ancient pyramid builders raised 70-ton blocks of granite to a height of 200 feet. It's not scalable. You can't say because I did a 25-foot that I can do the other, 200-foot. Nah. Those forces are multiplied, magnified many times over. Scaling up a project does not necessarily follow a linear path, nor does it rely solely on a fixed set of assumptions. So the researchers' 50-foot pyramid may not necessarily provide them with all the data necessary to calculate the requirements for building the Great Pyramid. Get out of here with that nonsense. In other words, Chapter 4 shows evidence of tool mark patterns consistent with those produced in many of today's large-scale precision manufacturing processes. The pyramid stones and surrounding quarries show clear evidence of precision machining requiring sophisticated manufacturing techniques and a power system to drive them. These weren't people just spinning a wheel. The scales are too great. What we have here are images from the book where he's showing, and I'll get into more detail on this, is just to breeze through, quarry marks at Aswan. This is one of the sites where the stones were quarried from, and he shows evidence there. Shows matching quarry marks on the pyramid granite. He gets more. I'll show other images that are more clear than these. These are kind of at a distance, but they got some close-up stuff as well. Here he's speaking to his perspective, not coming as a anthropologist or somebody who's tied to academia, where often they're protecting a particular perspective and advancing a particular perspective. He's saying here that I'm not an Egyptologist, I'm a technologist. I do not have much interest in who died when, whom they may have taken with them, and where they went. I intend no disrespect for the mountain of work and the millions of hours of study conducted on this subject by intelligent scholars, professional and amateur. But my interest, thus my focus, is elsewhere. What he's saying here is that academia been lying to y'all because, you know, they got concerns about what this is going to mean in the broader context. I don't have those concerns. I'm going to tell y'all what I see because that's what I'm interested in. I'm going to tell y'all what's there based on what I see. I don't care what it means in terms of the history and all of that other stuff, right? When I look at the artifact to investigate how it was manufactured, I am not concerned about its history or chronology. Having spent most of my career working with the machinery that actually creates modern artifacts such as jet engine components, I am able to analyze and determine how an artifact was created. I also have had training and experience in various non-conventional manufacturing methods such as laser processing and electrical discharge manufacturing, EDM. It's a powerful manufacturing technique. Having said this, I should state that contrary to some popular speculations on the cutting of stone for the pyramids, I have not seen evidence of laser cutting on the Egyptian rocks. That's one of the theories that's out there, that they were able to harness the power of light, radiated, magnified, to produce a laser type effect. It's also been said they were cut with sound. I'm not going to get into that here. He doesn't delve very much into that here, but those are some of the theories that are out there. He goes on to say that although the laser is a wonderful tool with many uses, its function as a cutting tool is limited to economically viable applications, such as cutting small holes in thin pieces of metal and refractory material. As a general purpose cutting tool, it cannot compete with the machining methods that were available before its inception. They got a high power requirement too. You got to be able to power a laser in order to get the type of power necessary to do cutting. Still, there's evidence for other non-conventional machining methods, as well as more sophisticated conventional type sawing, lathing, and milling practices. Undoubtedly, some of the artifacts that Petrie is a scholar who studied this material before Christopher Dunn. Undoubtedly, some of the artifacts that Petrie studied were produced using lathes. Lathes are for like circular manufacturing, cylinders, stuff like that. There's also evidence of clearly designed lathe tool marks on some sarcophagi lids. The Cairo Museum alone contains evidence, once it is properly analyzed, that is sufficient to prove that the ancient Egyptians used highly sophisticated manufacturing methods. For generations, scholars have focused on the nature of the cutting tools used. But while in Egypt in February 1995, he said as a technologist discovered evidence that raises a perhaps more intriguing question. What guided those cutting tools? You know, it's just like with hand tools. If you do something with a circular saw, you're trying to do anything close to precision, you got to have some means of guiding that tool, you know, so that it doesn't get away. Same here. The methods used to cut the masonry for the Great Pyramid can be deduced from the marks they left behind on the stone that exists today. You can look at them today and figure out how they were manufactured. The bulk of the pyramid was constructed with limestone blocks weighing an average of 2.5 tons each. While there are some interesting points to be made concerning the limestone that encased the Great Pyramid, and they will be addressed later, those stones do not offer the same information about the methods that were used to produce them as do the thousands of tons of granite. The granite is key because granite is much harder than limestone. You got to bring the noise and the power to machine granite. You can't be playing around. They might have been able to do something with some chisels and hammers on some limestone, but granite's gonna laugh you out the room, off the planet. You know, coming in there talking about doing some large-scale machining on granite. That's not gonna happen, right? So the granite is the clue. So these are some of the images taken from the book. It's more clear in the book, but these are showing tool marks, circular tool marks, showing a drilling or a lathe type of an operation on the stones right here. This right here is one of the sarcophagi, one of the coffins, so to speak. And he was able to see how the internal was created by a series of drill holes. The opening inside was created by a series of drill holes, and then after we had the core, was called the core, and the cusp. The cusp is the material that is the web between them. And then they just come in and break that away, and then machine it down, and then they get the finished box. This right here shows, what is this? This is Petri bowl shards. I don't remember what this. These were some bowls, large bowls that were used. I can't tell you specifically what they were for, but what I can tell you is what they're trying to show here is that they were showing how this surface right here is a combination of two machining operations. Okay, over here they were able to create this arc that runs like here from this center point, from up there, and then this other side, the center position was over here. You know, for that type of a machining operation, from two separate center locations. Here, he's showing again a smooth radius across the sarcophagus lid, made out of granite. A smooth, continuous radius in the corners, blending the surfaces together. This wasn't done with a chisel and a hammer. This was done with some type of a grinding, machine-powered operation with tools that were made out of metal. Hard metal, not copper or brass. That's the granite would chew that material away. You needed to have hardened steel tools in order to create those effects on there. He's showing here how with a circular, a drilling type of operation, they're showing the lines, the machine lines were 1/10 of an inch apart, which showed that with each rotation, the tool dropped down 1/10 of an inch. That's why the lines are 1/10 of an inch apart. And they created this cavity around it, left that what is this called? Core and cavity, left that core in the middle that was easily broken off, and then with a little bit of detailed machine work, they had that bottom, cleaned out in there. So, examples of that. Chapter 5 then further examines the precision manufacturing techniques required by examining remaining artifacts. Once again, you got one of the boxes, granite boxes, and this was one that was found still in the quarry. And it's showing features on there, a consistent radius in all of the corners in there, granite, highly precision surfaces right here. This was flat. These surfaces were so flat. These surfaces were perfectly flat. This is 13 feet by 7.5 feet. This surface, 13 by 7.5, and it's flat, perfectly flat. You don't get that with hand tools. Granite and granite, you don't get that with hand tools. Showing further details in the granite that required machining, precision machining. Chapter 6 is one of the single most interesting chapters in the book. And it gets away from the prior discussions about the machining. It addresses long-standing questions about how the ancient Kemet II moved such large blocks of stone across the considerable distance between Giza and varied quarry sites, and how they were able to lift these stones to the heights required during pyramid construction. Comparisons are made between those required efforts and the efforts of a single man named Edward Lee Scalman. The Coral Castle Mystery. While the cutting techniques of the ancient pyramid builders have been an ongoing topic for debate, they have not received the same attention and controversy as the methods that were used to lift and transport Cyclopean blocks of stone. Egyptologists and Orthodox believers of primitive methods argue that the huge blocks were moved and positioned using only manpower. But experts in moving heavy weights using modern cranes throw doubt on their theory, or just outright dismiss it as nonsense. His company, Christopher Dunn's company, had recently installed a hydraulic press that weighed 65 tons. In order to lift it and lower it through the roof, they had to bring in a special crane. The crane was brought to the site in pieces, transported from 80 miles away over a period of 5 days. After 15 semi-trailer loads, the crane was finally assembled and ready for use. As the press was lowered into its specially prepared pit, he asked one of the riggers about the heaviest weight he had lifted. He claimed that it was a 110-ton nuclear power plant vessel. When Christopher Dunn relayed it to him, the 70 and 200-ton weights of the blocks of stone used inside the Great Pyramid and the Valley Temple, he expressed amazement and disbelief at the primitive methods Egyptologists claimed were used. In other words, he said, there ain't no way in hell they lifted those things in the way they said, y'all say they did. They knew something that y'all didn't know, or y'all know something that y'all don't want to admit. But that's nonsense to say that they lifted those heavy weights with just manpower alone. But at the same time, I should read this here. For many of us to whom the Egyptologist's orthodox theory seems implausible, it is enough just to argue the issue from a logical standpoint, like I just did. For others, the debate becomes more meaningful when a proposed alternative method is demonstrated and proven to be successful. For that proof, we must turn to the one man in the world who, by demonstration, has supported the claim, I know the secret of how the pyramids of Egypt were built. That man was Edward Leedskalnin, an eccentric Latvian who immigrated to the United States and who is now deceased. But he left many intriguing clues that persuade us he may indeed have known such secrets. Leedskalnin devised a means to single-handedly lift and maneuver blocks of coral weighing up to 30 tons. In Homestead, Florida, using his closely guarded secret, he was able to quarry and construct an entire complex of monolithic coral blocks in an arrangement that reflected his own unique character. On average, the weight of a single block used in the coral castle was greater than those used to build the Great Pyramid. He labored for 28 years to complete the work, which consisted of a total of 1,100 tons of rock. What was Leedskalnin's secret? Is it possible for a 5-foot-tall, 110-pound man to accomplish such a feat without knowing techniques that are undiscovered to our mainstream contemporary understanding of physics and mechanics? Leedskalnin was a student of the universe. Within his castle walls, he had a 22-ton obelisk, a 22-ton moon block, a 23-ton Jupiter block, a Saturn block, a 9-ton gate, a coral rocking chair that weighed 3 tons, and numerous other items. A huge 30-ton block, which he considered to be his major achievement, was crowned with a gable-shaped rock. Leedskalnin somehow single-handedly created and moved these massive objects without the benefits of cranes and other heavy machinery, a feat that astounds many engineers and technologists who compare these achievements with those employed by workers handling similar weights in industry today. He did it. There's evidence. Here's a story. This is about Leedskalnin. He had to move his facility. He had robbed and decided that he wanted to move to a safer location. So he had to pack up and move his entire coral castle, everything on the ground. So as they prepared to load so he hired movers to help him do this. So as they prepared to load a 20-ton obelisk onto the truck, Leedskalnin asked the truck driver to leave him alone for a moment. Once out of sight, the truck driver heard a loud crash. Hurrying back to his truck, he was stopped in his tracks by the sight before him, hardly believing his eyes. He had returned just in time to see Leedskalnin dusting off his hands, the huge obelisk loaded and weighing down his flatbed.
Oh, wait.
What?
Once in Homestead, the trucker was asked to leave his flatbed overnight and return in the morning. He was doubtful that Lee Skellman would be able to fulfill his promise that the obelisk would be off the truck and erected in the place he had set out for it. It was a good thing the truck driver didn't bet money against Lee Skellman's ability to fulfill his word, because when he returned the following morning, Lee Skellman had moved the monolith into position just as he had promised. For his stupendous feats of construction and engineering, Lee Skellman received attention not only from engineers and technologists but from the U.S. government, who paid him a visit, hoping to be enlightened. Lee Skellman received the officials gracefully, but they left none the wiser. In 52, falling ill and on his last legs, Lee Skellman checked himself into the hospital and slipped away from this life, taking his secrets about moving massive objects with him. What he was talking about, what he said, and I started reading a little bit on him. I haven't gone far into my reading on him, but what he said to offer a clue into how he was able to do it was that everything is a magnet, and we know that. We know that. Science knows that. Everything has magnetic properties. The atom has magnetic properties. Everything is made up of atoms, right? So somehow he was able to exploit properties of magnetism to somehow offset this huge mass. I haven't gone as far as I want to yet into reading on that and discovering that, but he had witnesses, not immediate witnesses, people who saw him do it, but they saw the work in the absence of cranes and other heavy lifting equipment. So it's clear that he knew something.
Yeah.
Chapter 7 summarizes the open questions, while Chapter 8 engages the power plant theory in detail. This introduces the science. I need to eat something. I'm going to peel this orange while I read. This introduces the science, physics, and engineering principles I want and need to examine further to gain a greater command of what Dunn proposes from a systems level. In other words, I have a sense of there being viability to what he's saying being viable, but my conditioning as a designer and engineer would prevent me from claiming that I understand it without examining it deeply. I need to get into it. So I would need to revisit. This begins to get into the material that I need to revisit more thoroughly before I can tell y'all, what it really means. I'll be able to discuss the elements as I've introduced already, but I can't offer a full opinion on it yet. So as we do in our systems development, we always create a model or prototype to test what we propose or design our system to do. And I actually would like to create a small scale prototype of what he's proposing at some point. Maybe I'll get around to it. And maybe we might do that at work, because this whole power system thing is right along the lines of what we do, what the company does that I'm consulting for right now. One of their systems talk about converting energy and producing energy. They've had a system that they've made available to government and industry for many years, where they capture waste heat, like from a refinery or any type of a process that generates a whole lot of heat, where the heat would normally just dissipate into the environment. Well, they capture that heat in one of their systems and they convert it into electricity. So all that's being proposed here is, right along the lines of the thought lines of what we do at this company. As we do in our systems development, we always create a model or prototype to test what we propose or what we design our systems to do. And until I can study and test everything being presented here, I won't be able to confirm or validate what Dunn is proposing. But from a less detailed perspective, the energy conversions he proposes are valid, rendering the broader system concept he theorizes as highly plausible. Certainly can be done. The natural forces of Earth could very well be harnessed and transformed for our use if existing economic forces didn't limit innovation.
There you go.
Right now, the oil industry Fossil fuels is what's driving the world.
Yeah.
Driving the world.
Yeah.
You know, that's the foundation of the banking industry and all of that stuff too, right? So they're not moving off of that. They're not, you know. We could have a completely different society if those people weren't causing the earth to make sacrifices for wealth,
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
right? Destroying the earth.
Yeah.
This system didn't destroy the earth.
No.
This system borrowed from the earth, right? It put humans at risk. We'll see a little bit about that in a moment. Potentially anything generating high energy is a threat to human beings, right? The earth. This is from the Giza Power Plant, where again he begins introducing. The earth is a dynamic, energetic body that has supported civilization's demand for fuel for centuries. To date, this demand has predominantly been for energy in the form of fossil fuels. Well, in modern times, anyway. More recently, scientific advances have allowed us to tap into the power of the atom, and further research in this area promises greater advances in the future. There is, however, another form of abundant energy in the earth that, in its most basic form, has, for the most part, been largely ignored as a potential source of usable energy. It usually gets our attention when it builds up to a point of destruction. That energy is seismic, and it is the result of the Earth's plates being driven by the constant agitation of the molten rock within the Earth. Seismic energy. So what he's talking about here is that the seismic energy of the Earth produces flows of energy in longitudinal waves, seismic waves that can be harnessed if properly aligned and tuned. If an edifice is properly aligned and tuned to these waves, that energy can be absorbed on a continuous basis, and if properly done, it could be absorbed in a way that dissipates the energy and that's building up and leading to earthquakes. Again, this is stuff I got to study further to understand, but it was absolutely fascinating to read it.
Yeah.
Also, there are magnetic fields. The Earth is a big magnet, right? And if we were to tap into that magnetic energy could also be a source that could be tapped into and harnessed for practical purpose. Here, he shows how a quartz crystal, this is something that was brand new to me, shows how vibrational energy across quartz introduces alternating tension and compression that, by virtue of the nature of the stone itself, causes it to produce an electrical energy. That's similar to how if you take a magnet and wrap a copper wire around it and spin the magnet, it excites the electrons and causes them to flow and produce electrical energy. It's just one of the phenomenons of nature that, I don't understand. PhDs understand why it works like that. I don't understand why it works like that, but I know that it does. And, I'm using it to help design motors. The PhDs understand why it works. I don't need to know why it works to harness and make practical application of it. I don't need to know why a crystal under tension and compression produces electrical energy, but it does. And this is one of the elements that exists in the pyramid system for producing energy, and he's able to observe that. The pyramids themselves are positioned at the center of Earth's landmass. That somehow relates to all of this data that he pulled together to show how that positioning at that location makes this baby in the prime location for doing exactly what he's saying it does. What is he saying it does? He's saying that the pyramid is a coupled oscillator A coupled oscillator will draw energy from the source as long as the source continues to vibrate. The earth itself is the source, and the vibrations that it's absorbing on a continuous basis are then harnessed, converted. Is converted from vibration, and this is easy to see how vibration energy can be converted into sound energy.
Yes.
And then how sound energy can then be converted as part of a system to transfer it into electricity. Your speakers and microphones do it all the time. A microphone converts sound into electric energy. That's why I'm able to speak into a microphone and get a feed out of it that can be interpreted by equipment. It's an electrical signal that the system is then able to interpret, right? That's an example of sound being converted into electricity. A speaker is the exact opposite. It's an example of electrical energy being converted into sound. So these types of energy conversions are part and parcel to what we do on a daily basis in the modern world. So the prospect of them doing it in the ancient world is not far-fetched at all. It's what we do today. Chapter 9 through 11. The mighty crystal, an amazing maser, and a hydrogen generator, respectively, go further into the science and physics requiring further study, by me, anyway, as they explain how natural earth forces are captured and converted from vibration to sound, and how that energy applies a force upon quartz crystals present in the upper pyramid or the king's chamber, activated by a hydrogen generator catalyst in the lower chamber, the queen's chamber, to create electricity that would then be transmitted through wires or wirelessly to help power ancient Kemetic civilization. This system-level conception, where all elements are explained in the context of surviving artifacts and evidence, is certainly more than plausible as an explanation for the ultimate purpose of the Great Pyramid. And once again, because it's grounded in evidence on the ground today, it's even more plausible. Why else would they have acid remnants, detectable remnants of acid there if it wasn't part of the system like what he's describing there? You know. So I'm going to close out with just some of the imagery from that before I get into a 2-minute presentation, a 2-minute video clip from Christopher Dunn, where you'll get to hear him in his own words explaining what he saw here, and he does a little bit of experimentation to support it. So these are some of the elements that he found there still today. They're of course not in new form, but he was able to derive these elements from what exists in the pyramid today. Prior explanations for what these elements were did not cover them. It didn't cover them. But what he saw there explains it. So what he saw were resonators, and let me see, a tuning fork, where this was where the vibration, and this was called the Grand Gallery. That's where the vibration was being converted into sound. And I'll show in the full image, the loop, as it goes from the Queen's chamber and up into the King's chamber, where all of that was happening. But these elements exist there today. Resonators. What are resonators there for? What are these tuning forks there for? What purpose did they serve in this pyramid? What do those have to do with a tune?
Right.
Why are they there? Some of the resonators going into the Queen, into the chambers. These was one of the filters that he described. One of the audio filters that he describes. And the acoustic filter over here, this is part of it too. Sound waves with an incorrect frequency have wavelengths that do not coincide with the distance between the baffles are filtered out by this system structure here. He explains what happens here, how they only allow certain, in order for this system to work, it's a finely tuned system. So they're only allowing certain frequencies to make it through. So he's describing how this acoustic filter right here going into the King's chamber, would isolate the wrong frequencies, prevent them from gaining access. He even shows evidence of a microwave amplifier. There. Again, these are things that I got to study more. You know, I just read the book once. I haven't torn this book apart yet like I will. He's showing here in the King's Chamber all of these layers of quartz up there. And he raised some questions earlier in the book about why they did this. I mean, if they were just doing this just for construction purposes, just for holding up the weight, well, they could have gotten rid of these 4 layers right there. This stack and then this unfinished surface up here. He explains what all of that, why that surface at the top is unfinished, why it's precise on the bottom, and all of that stuff. He explains all of that. A maser, this is sort of like this is consistent with what he's describing. A maser, I think of it as being like a laser, and it is. Laser, maser, the difference is just the meaning of the word, the M and the L. It's an acronym for something. I don't claim to have a full understanding of that yet. But in any case, he shows presence of a maser there that was used in the microwave, what do you call it? The microwave amplifier. Showing other elements of a microwave horn antenna and waveguide. Microwave horn antenna, waveguide he's showing with a corresponding opening in the north wall and in the south wall. He's showing how all of this stuff works together. Queen's Chamber here. In the Queen's Chamber was it's a hydrogen generator. They were combining, they were passing 2 chemicals, hydrated zinc chloride through that side, hydrochloric acid through that side, and within the chamber it produces hydrogen. And that hydrogen was then piped up into the chamber, and that provided the fuel. That was the catalyst for this firing that was occurring there. Chapter 12 through 15 close out the book with a fascinating discussion about evidence of catastrophic failure in the power center, the King's Chamber, resulting from a hydrogen-induced explosion that pushed the monstrous walls of the chamber out of their original alignment by a full inch symmetrically. Huge blocks of granite pushed out symmetrically is evidence of an explosion. And he's able to document that based on what's going on right there, right now. These chapters summarize the findings put forth by Dunn and explain his overall system thesis. These chapters also look back into the known record for evidence that Kemetic culture knew of and harnessed the power of electricity for practical purposes. It closes out with further discussion of how the evidence found at the Giza complex today disputes or renders meaningless current and previously held assumptions about the purpose and function of the Great Pyramid at Giza and the related capabilities and capacities of the ancient Kemetu who constructed them. So what he's showing from a whole system standpoint is that, let's see, with the reaction chamber happening down here, you had a pathway where hydrogen made its way up there, and how there was a sound generation happening here, with acoustic filtering taking place there, and here was where the all of the magic was happening and the electricity was generated, and it was able to be output wirelessly. That sounds crazy, that we can transmit electricity wirelessly, but it's happening today. There's a system in the Alaska wilderness called HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, high frequency active aural research program. Yeah, they're doing the exact same thing. They are taking concentrated doses of high power energy and projecting it up into the upper atmosphere, bouncing it back down into the earth. They're able to use that to communicate with submarines. They're able to use that to induce earthquakes.
You know, one of the TV shows, what was that guy? Was he a wrestler or somebody? He did something on that. Was that the wrestler guy?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's what's his name?
Not Hulk Hogan, but
No.
somebody, but it was a
No,
wrestler.
Jesse Van.
There you go.
What's
Jesse
Ventura?
Ventura.
Yeah, Jesse Ventura. Conspiracy theory.
There you go. There you go. I saw that.
Yeah. HAARP is something everybody should know about HAARP. But the point is, HAARP is based on Tesla technology. Nikola Tesla, the same guy who came up with the power system that's power in the modern world. He theorized that electricity could be transmitted wirelessly. And we're old enough in this room to remember all of the conversation in the 80s about Star Wars and all of that. But then it just disappeared. It just went away. HAARP was the result of Star Wars. The program that Ronald Reagan had funded. They were supposed to be using this system to shoot down missiles and all of that stuff. Satellites and all of that stuff. It's the same technology. It's the exact same technology. There's evidence, long established evidence, that the ancient Egyptians were harnessing the power of electricity for practical purposes. There are plenty of images of light bulbs in the carvings. Plenty images. And there's much more to be said about the Jed energy source. You know, I didn't come prepared to have a full discussion about that today, but that there's a whole lot of evidence. It's indisputable, really, about the fact that the ancient Kemetu, the ancient Egyptians, had long ago harnessed the power of electricity for practical purposes. So with that as part of our understanding, this is not so implausible. You know, they were already doing it. So this is a brief clip of Christopher Dunn speaking about his discoveries here. And Christopher Dunn is a typical engineer in the sense that he will put you to sleep. I was looking at his presentations on this material, and I was like, I can't show this to my people. No people being here knocked out, you know, fast asleep. But this was just a couple of minute clip, and it touches on, this was from Ancient Aliens. I was trying to get the whole clip. This was a clip that I found. It's not complete. And I was trying to download the whole episode, but I didn't get around to all of that. But this is him in his own words.
Engineer Chris Dunn believes the answer can be found by further examination of the shafts in what some call the Queen's Chamber, where traces of zinc and hydrochloric acid have been discovered.
I believe the chemical coming in through the northern shaft was hydrated zinc, and the other chemical coming through the southern shaft and into the chamber was dilute hydrochloric acid. These are actually seen on the chamber walls.
Dunn suggests that the two chemicals were poured down through the shafts and then mixed together inside the Queen's Chamber, triggering combustion.
This vessel represents the Queen's Chamber. Into the tubes we're going to pour hydrated zinc and then hydrochloric acid. When you bring these two liquids together, a chemical reaction occurs, and a product of that chemical reaction is hydrogen. And you can see the vapor, the hydrogen, escaping through the chimney, and there you have the reaction.
Dunn speculates that the hydrogen gas traveled from the Queen's Chamber into the King's Chamber. Then, the vibrations from the subterranean pool energized the hydrogen atoms into a microwave energy beam.
The evidence that indicates the use of hydrogen can be found in the King's Chamber. There's a shaft in the King's Chamber, has dimensions of 8.4 by 4.8, which would be suitable for a waveguide for a maser, or microwave amplification through stimulated emission radiation. And from there, we can actually propose many different ideas of what they did with it.
So, like I said, it's not the full clip, but it gives a bit of a, gives him the opportunity to put some of this in his own words. So what do y'all think of that?
I like it. You know, Khalid, did you go inside that pyramid when you went there in the 80s?
Mm-hmm.
I did too, but you know, I was just gonna say, you know, if you go in there with a certain type of background, you know, you're going there from the study of Egyptology, and you don't know what you're looking at, just like Don is saying. You don't know what you're looking at. You know, you're just taking what somebody tells you, and you're going in the pyramid thinking, ooh and ah, and you know, this is great. And we actually went, and I was looking, we went through, because when you go through that big, it's kind of like a cathedral. Going up to the King's Chamber. We didn't go to the Queen's Chamber, they wouldn't let you go there.
No.
But you have to like crawl through, you know, that little space that they were saying. You have to get on your hands and knees and crawl into that chamber. Then when you get inside, then you can stand up. But I was thinking, I don't even remember seeing no.
Yeah, now you want to go back.
Yeah, but they won't let you go in there now. I don't
I
remember
know.
seeing anything because you know you didn't pay any attention
Right.
to it because you didn't know what you were looking at.
Right.
You didn't know exactly what you were looking at, and you didn't have the knowledge base to understand.
Right.
You know, it just wasn't there.
Right. I mean,
In the 80s, they let you go in.
Yeah.
Like 2007.
They didn't really have the knowledge themselves. They were Arabs.
did somebody?
Actually, we should have a tour guide to explain it to you when you went in there.
Yeah, but see, that's what I'm trying to tell you. It was
Yeah,
from
they
an
don't know
Egyptology
Right,
point
yeah,
of view.
right.
You know, telling us about
Towing
the
the line.
tomb. Yeah, you know. Oh, this is where the king was.
Was, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't even get in there when I went. I was afraid to go in there now.
No, they only let us go to the King's Chamber, and I just remember it was a very narrow passageway, and people were coming and going. One side you came, the other side you went, but it was a big old giant. It really was like a big open kind of cathedral.
Like this room.
Yeah, it was.
What was the sound like?
I don't remember. I don't
It
remember.
was hollow, you know, it was echoey, but not, you know, with all the people talking. It was like if we were in the room, we'd be hearing each other's conversations.
There's talk about it being tuned to a certain frequency, and how you can, if you know what that resonant frequency is, then you can tune to that.
Right.
There.
One thing I can say though, because you would look at the outside and think that it was a solid piece,
Yeah.
and then once you went in there, you realized there was like chambers in there. You know, so it wasn't no real solid piece. So I can understand what he's saying. You know.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah. And in order to properly understand it, of course, you got to understand. You got to be able to explain what all of those elements are for.
Right. That's right.
So that's the presentation on the Giza Power Plant. It was an absolutely fascinating read,
Yeah.
and one that I intend to go back.
Yeah.
visit.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I want to do what Christopher Dunn did there on the small scale.
Yeah.
You know, rig up an entire little system,
Yes.
you know, and see if we can produce some output from it. You know. So next week, wrapping up our Black History Month, February, we got Soul Cinema next week, and that's going to be a film titled The Manuscripts of Timbuktu. And we've all heard about Timbuktu, we've heard it mentioned, but a whole lot of people don't know anything about
That's
Timbuktu, one of our great centers of learning in the Mali Empire. I believe this film is not a long film, it's only 52 minutes. It talks about the struggle to preserve, the ongoing struggle to preserve the ancient records of Timbuktu. And it speaks to some of the people who are involved in that. I put the trailer on here so that I can hopefully get you all excited about it and come out next week to take a look at it. So we're gonna play this 3-minute trailer.
And also, just pause a second. When you get your announcements, please pass it on to your village.
Yeah.
And let them know about what we're doing, because eventually they're going to say, oh, well, they're coming to come. We need to let it be known. That's the sound.
Yeah, Timbuktu has come to be
Any distinct-
a name for any distinct
Yeah.
remote place.
Like Kokomo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ces manuscrits de Tombouctou pour nous représentent à la fois
But the manuscripts
notre patrimoine,
represent
le
us as our
patrimoine
heritage,
africain,
African
et la
heritage,
contribution de
and
l'Afrique
Africa's
apportée à la
contribution to the
civilisation
world's
universelle.
civilization.
L'Afrique est un continent de tradition.
Africa is a continent of oral tradition, but Africa is also a continent with a written tradition, which isn't as well known to some.
Les Noirs ont
Black people were writing long before European colonization.
avant la colonisation européenne. C'est uniquement
It's only
à
because
cause
of
de
this
cette
colonization
colonisation
which turned black people into beggars
qui les a chosifiés,
and objectified and
qui les a
dehumanized them.
déshumanisés.
Yeah.
Manuscripts of Timbuktu. I thought they were going to have a bit more into that in that trailer, because the film is fascinating.
Is it just subtitles?
To be perfectly honest, I don't recall whether it's all subtitled or not. I don't believe it is.
Tombouctou est la ville de 333 saints parce que depuis au début, les fondateurs sont des musulmans, des lettrés, des sahariens. Mais avec le commerce transsaharien et soudanais, la ville est devenue très riche et elle a joué un rôle important dans le commerce international. Certains disent que Tombouctou a été fondée au début de l'an 1000. Donc c'est une ville qui a entre 900 et 1000 ans d'existence.
So it goes into that I've seen this film a couple of times, and I don't hesitate to say that trailer doesn't do it justice.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't see the trailer before I came here today, but it doesn't do it justice. It talks about the how with European invasions and attempts to destroy the records, that the people themselves took responsibility for preserving the manuscripts, and how there is a broad and ongoing effort, amongst the people from the local areas to maintain and preserve those records. So it talks at some length about that, and it's a very, very compelling film, because I thought it was the perfect way to wrap up a discussion about Black history, because it deals with it at one of the most substantive levels. So I hope you all will come back out next week for that, and then as we get into and that's leading, of course, into our Black Women's History Month,
All right.
which we're gonna do for March, and we got a couple of we got 5 weeks in March. So we got just to recap real quick. On the 3rd, we're going to do another compilation tribute. I titled it Mother's Protective Instinct, a tribute to women warriors and activists who paved the way. Some of my favorites we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about some of the popular ones, but some of the not so popular ones too. Ida B. Wells. We're going to talk about Ida B. Wells. We're going to talk about Dorothy Nash. Diane Nash, Diane Nash, and some of the others who don't get a whole lot of attention. After that, our first teachers, a tribute to women scholars and scientists who paved the way. So we're going to go back, find some of our first teachers, scholars, scientists who paved the way and pay tribute to them. March 17th, we're going to have a special event. This emerges out of a project that I got involved in many years ago. I think it was 2010, 2011. A friend of mine who was named Tony Wayford, who was then the director of Action Network, Al Sharpton's group out here in Los Angeles. He had a weekly article in the Sentinel, and he earned his living as an advocate for HIV/AIDS testing and stuff like that. And he was putting together a program through his organization where they were going to create a program for 4 or 5 southern states with the highest incidence of HIV/AIDS and other STDs. So he was putting together this panel discussion to kick off the event in Atlanta, and he asked me to sit on the panel. But he also asked me to write an article for the event, and I wrote that piece, and I titled it "The Threat is Real and the Drum is Beating, but Where Are the Men?" And what he was trying to do was call out brothers to take an active stand against the infestation of the problem scourge of STDs and all of that. He was dealing with it from the perspective of, already being involved in HIV/AIDS. He was dealing with men who have sex with other men but living on the down low and all of that, and calling them out, to be responsible, but also calling out heterosexual men for some of their behavior and their lack of presence, on these things. So I wrote that article. Article was very well received. Panel discussion was very well received. The program kicked off and had some success and all of that, but it put me in a state of mind where I was thinking about how some black males, notice I didn't say men, some black males contribute to these problems in our community. Not only how some black males contribute to those problems in our community through their reckless or immoral behavior, but they take it even further. I wrote in an article that how did I say it? That I first talked about how African people have been influenced by colonization and how we bear physical, psychological, spiritual scars. But then I mentioned that if a conversation can be found about the ongoing impact of colonization on us, it usually is centered around the attack on the black man. And though that's a valid topic to be considered, much less is said about the attack on women, on black women, with even less being said about the attacks on black women that certain black males help to perpetuate. Right? So that got me thinking about wanting to revisit this at some point to have a conversation about the scourge of violence against women in our community. And we decided to put it on the schedule as a conversation for Black History, again, going against the normal conversations that we have about history, but it's a relevant conversation in a historical context anyway, because I titled the discussion "Recurring Patterns, Debilitating Silence, and Indomitable Spirits," because the recurring patterns, I argue, originate from our tendency to duplicate the attitudes and the behavior of the colonizer. And in African history and culture, women were celebrated, revered, even, right? But then something changed with the advent of colonization, right? And now we have this attitude amongst many of us that manhood is determined or defined to some extent by how many women you get access to and exploit for meaningless, purposes. That then leads to a general disregard or disrespect or failure to acknowledge the divinity of our women. And then there are recurring patterns. Then of course there's debilitating silence because we don't have conversations about this nearly enough. Women don't even talk about it enough, in order for the issues to be addressed. But, even in the midst of all of that, we know that our women are born with and maintain indomitable spirits. So in spite of these challenges and others, our women still rise, still do, still play that primary role in our community. So what we're going to do, we're going to have a conversation with myself and Dr. Jamil Harold Sims, who is a specialist in the field of, what's the term that she uses? Sexual habits, patterns, all types of...
I just want to make a comment about that. Maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, they had this big thing. I was listening to it on KPFK, and I just distinctly remember it was like some medical people, and from a public health point of view, one of the doctors said that if we cured all of the HIV today, tomorrow the same black people are going to have HIV again because of the way they behave.
Yeah. Now there's a broad discussion to be had about HIV, where as it concerns all of these things. There's an absolutely outstanding film. I've referenced it here before. Maybe I'll put it on the Soul Cinema list one day. A film called House of Numbers. Write that down. Go and look that up. Watch the film House of Numbers if you want to get some insight on HIV/AIDS.
YouTube?
Yeah, you find it on YouTube. The beauty of that film is that it includes on-camera interviews with everybody, and I do mean everybody, who was involved in the advent discovery of HIV/AIDS. From Dr. Luc Montagnier, who ultimately won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for discovering HIV, to the other doctor from the States, I can see his face, but I forget his name, who actively stole his work and tried to claim it as his own, to all of the doctors who were involved in the early trials, the early diagnoses and all that stuff. He got these people on film. On film. I don't know how he did it. I need to find that. I wish I could think of that one doctor's name.
House of Numbers.
House of Numbers. But not to get too far off topic. So Dr. Sims, I'm going to be speaking about men's responsibility where these things are concerned. And then Dr. Sims is going to be speaking more from a clinical, therapeutics, cultural standpoint about how those things should be engaged. And she's the most qualified person for it. I mean, she has a practice. She's a professor where she trains therapists. She's not a therapist herself, but she's training the therapists, in her work as a professor. And then she has a practice where she's a life coach and provides counseling services also. So she's an excellent person to lead that discussion. And then on the 24th, I'm going to do this presentation that I've done before. It's actually built off a paper I presented at a conference a few years ago titled When God is She. And it's a review of the divine feminine principle in world history. And it's being presented as a much needed concept to transform the world today. So we're going to get into that conversation on the 24th. And then on the 31st, we're going to have Soul Cinema. And that's going to be an absolutely outstanding film titled Pray the Devil Back to Hell. It's a film about a women's movement in Liberia that was organized by this sister named Lema Bowie. That sister is so strong, I named my daughter after her. And she led a women's movement across cultural boundaries, across religious boundaries, where they used the collective power of women to bring the second Liberian Civil War to an end.
Wow.
A true,
Truly.
Revolution.
pardon me?
Revolutionary.
Oh, I thought I felt some shaking
Oh.
in the building.
Oh.
I would say that's the ancestors' approval. I would
Yeah.
take that. Signaling their approval. But it's a compelling film about how the as I'm to be suggesting on the 24th, how the combined power of women, the collective power of women, can be harnessed to change the world. It's a practical example of that. This is the When God Is She. That's built off of this paper. I present the title. The world will change when women decide the world will change.
That's it.
That is so true. Yeah.
I just want to say real quick that, you know, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that book and that movie, The Shack, and where that guy that wrote it, that white guy, he represented the Holy Spirit, God, and the
I read that book.
Yeah, The Shack.
I read the book.
I'm gonna
Okay.
close out the
Okay.
the live feed if it's still
But
on because I think we're pretty
he
much
chose
there.
different people to
I don't know if we had
represent
any people.
some white male or some male to represent